Hello and welcome to this talk. Today, I will be presenting some recent work which shows implications of the blockchain CAP theorem and in particular how it allows for protocols that have user-dependent adaptivity and finality. My name is Suryanarayana Sankagiri and I am a PhD student at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. This work is jointly done with Xuechao Wang, a fellow PhD student, and professors Sreeram Kannan and Pramod Viswanath. Let us begin with discussing a fundamental impossibility result in distributed systems, the CAP theorem. Formally, this result states that a distributed system cannot have both consistency and availability at a time when the network is partitioned. Originally conjectured by Brewer in 2000, this was stated and proven formally by Gilbert and Lynch in 2002. Let's understand this theorem with the help of a figure. When communication among different peers is broken, the nodes can either appear available or functional to a client at the expense of being inconsistent amongst each other, as is shown in this figure, or they can preserve their consistency by stalling completely and thereby not remaining available. The CAP theorem's impossibility result points to a trade-off to be made while designing a system. A system may either be consistency favoring or availability favoring. Blockchains, being distributed systems, also inherit the availability consistency trade-off implicated by the CAP theorem. Indeed, the trade-off is evident in many of the consensus protocols that we see today. Roughly speaking, the Nakamoto consensus protocol, or the longest chain protocol that we see in Bitcoin and Ethereum among others, favors availability or liveness. In contrast, PBFT style protocols that are quorum based and are found in Algorand or Facebook's DM favor consistency or safety. Naively, in blockchains, one should favor consistency over availability. So this should lead us to believe that PBFT-like consensus protocols are best for blockchains. However, we know that is not true. Bitcoin-like protocols have their own advantage. In particular, they work in a permissionless setting, while these protocols cannot. In a sense, the holy grail of blockchains would be to have a truly permissionless protocol that remains consistent under network partition. Unfortunately, this is not possible. A protocol like Bitcoin, which remains available under dynamic participation, namely, that is, a permissionless system, must necessarily be inconsistent in network partition. On the other hand, a PBFT-like protocol that remains consistent during network partition must remain unavailable during dynamic participation. The main reason for this is that from the point of view of one player, a network partition or faulty communication is indistinguishable from a scenario of dynamic participation, that is, a case where many users have suddenly left the system. Because of these constraints, there's a clear trade-off between these two desirable properties. On the one hand, we would like our protocol to be consistent even during network partition and of course be available during synchrony. And on the other hand, we would like our protocol to be available and consistent uh, in dynamic participation under network synchrony. This trade-off is captured formally by the blockchain CAP theorem that was recently proposed and proven in a paper by Lewis Pye and Ruff Garden. It states that a blockchain protocol cannot offer both adaptivity and finality, where adaptivity is the property of being available under dynamic participation, and finality is the same as being consistent under network partition. Now, pretty much all previous consensus protocols make a system-wide choice between adaptivity or finality. As we have seen, Bitcoin-like protocols are adaptive, while classical consensus protocols like PBFT are finality guaranteeing. In this work, we show that this needn't be the case. In fact, this choice can be made at a user level. Different users in the same system decide if they want to adopt an adaptive ledger or a finality guaranteeing ledger. At the heart of our design is a protocol that produces two ledgers instead of one. This is shown in the block diagram on the right. One ledger is adaptive while the other offers finality. Each ledger is generated by its own confirmation rule. So, in a nutshell, there is one block proposal rule, but there are two different confirmation rules. The K-deep confirmation rule, as in Bitcoin, would lead to an adaptive ledger, whereas a quorum certificate confirmation rule would yield a finality guaranteeing ledger. Each user or client can choose which confirmation rule to apply. In fact, it can switch between the two rules over time. Thus, adaptivity versus finality is now the user's choice. An important point to note is that in such a design, the two ledgers must be self-consistent. This means that all the transactions that appear in one ledger must also appear in the other ledger in the same order. This poses many challenges in the design, as these two confirmation rules must be in sync. Further, the block proposal rule must also respect both the confirmation rules. It is natural that the adaptive ledger typically leads the finality guaranteeing ledger. In other words, the adaptive ledger is ahead of the finality guaranteeing ledger. This is because the adaptive ledger confirms blocks optimistically, while the other ledger is more conservative. Under a particular scenario, the adaptive ledger will go ahead and confirm blocks, presuming that the scenario is that of dynamic participation, whereas the finality based ledger would play it safe and presume that the network is actually partitioned, thereby not confirming blocks. When at times there is network asynchrony or lower participation in the system, the finality guaranteeing ledger falls behind the adaptive ledger. When good network conditions and full participation resumes, the, small, the, the smaller ledger catches up and the two ledgers will be nearly identical. Thus, there is an ebb and flow like behavior, and therefore, such protocols have been christened by this name in this recent paper. I want to make a point that these dual mode ledgers are not just of theoretical concern, they are of great practical importance too. This claim is based on the fact that finality gadgets, in combination with a proof of work blockchain, also offer two user dependent confirmation rules. A user can confirm a KD block or confirm a checkpointed block. In fact, our protocol can also be thought of as a finality gadget. We start from a proof of work leader election mechanism that is truly permissionless, that is, it enables dynamic participation. A leader's job is to propose new blocks. In addition, we have a permissioned set of checkpointers whose job is to propose certificates to finalize blocks. They do so by taking part in a permissioned classical BFT protocol. Here too, we allow for dynamic participation. We model this by allowing checkpointers to go offline. The key difference uh, between our protocol and existing finality gadgets is that earlier works do not meet all the requirements of a dual ledger protocol that we mentioned earlier. In fact, what we show is that a gadget that is merely a layer 2 functionality on top of a Bitcoin like protocol cannot work as a dual ledger protocol, giving the guarantees that we discussed before. The key principle in our design is to redefine what is the canonical chain of the protocol. In Bitcoin, this is simply the longest chain, whereas in our design, it is the longest chain containing the latest checkpoint or certified block that has been certified by the checkpointers. In the figure, the left chain here would be the canonical chain as it contains the latest certified block, even though the chain on the right is longer. An honest user always holds this canonical chain in its memory. Consequently, honest miners always propose on the tip of this longest checkpointed chain. Moreover, checkpointers propose and vote for KD blocks in their canonical chain within the BFT subprotocol. The consequence of this design are twofold. Firstly, this design preserves the inherent validity of blockchains. In particular, it ensures that all certified blocks lie on a single chain, which implies that all the blocks confirmed by either confirmation rule will lie on a single chain. Thus, the block validity can be checked right at the time of proposing the block. This is an important feature that is there in most classical blockchain protocols but is missing in the design of Notas and Say. Their protocol requires a step called external validation, which may not be practical to perform. A second property that this design provides is the fact that the two ledgers are now nested. A certified block is always KD, and therefore a block confirmed by the finality guaranteeing rule will always be confirmed by the KD rule. To wrap things up, I would like to state the security guarantees of our protocol under different operating conditions. Under ideal conditions, that is, network synchrony and all users being online, which we call static participation, both ledgers are safe and live. Indeed, that's what we expect. When we relax one of the conditions by allowing for dynamic participation, that is, allowing nodes to go offline, the adaptive ledger continues to remain safe and live. This is just like Bitcoin. The finality guaranteeing ledger remains safe but may not be live if the participation drops too low. If we now have a different relaxation and assume that the network is partially synchronous, that is, there are periods of asynchrony interspersed with synchrony, then the finality ledger comes into play. It remains safe always and resumes liveness after synchrony. In contrast, the adaptive ledger may lose safety during asynchrony, although it regains it after some time. Our protocol is the first to have all these guarantees along with intrinsic validity. To end, I would like to leave you with some open questions. The first point is to improve the design of our protocol, particularly in order to reduce the latency of the checkpointing mechanism. Currently, our design suffers from high latency, especially when it comes to confirming finalized blocks. A second interesting direction is to see if one mechanism can help guard against a large fraction of adversary on the other end. Currently, we require that the adversary controls less than 50% of the mining power and one-third of the checkpointers. However, can the checkpointers help guard the system against a 51% mining adversary? And finally, our goal is one important question is, can Gasper, which was proposed by Buterin et al. In 2020, be made secure? Currently, the protocol has been shown to be insecure, but if there is a small tweak that makes it secure, then even Gasper would be such a dual ledger protocol. Thank you for your attention. I invite you to see our paper online for more details.